Thanks for clicking. Canada's inflation rate surged in the month of May to its highest level since 1983, up to 7.7%.
Holy sh**.
The data came as much of a surprise, beating almost all expectations, as most banks were thinking it was going to come in around 7.2, 7.3%, and only Scotiabank arguing that it was going to come in at 7.8%. A 7.7% inflation rate is obviously going to put even more pressure on the Bank of Canada to issue another jumbo rate hike in their rate announcement in July, probably in the range of 75 basis points. This comes at a time when the Trudeau government is getting more vocal about the inflation rate, pledging $8.9 billion to tackle it, with Scotiabank expressing unusually vocal opposition to the government's plans.
Sometimes you don't make no sense, Donnie.
So what I want to do today is go over Canada's inflation rate, discuss the government's plan to tackle it and Scotiabank's retort, and then take a look at what to look for next. Speaking of what to look for next, the end of the month is upon us, and with that, the local real estate boards should start to release their sales data by late next week, which I'm assuming will continue to show even more decreases in our home prices. We'll obviously have updates out on that data on this channel. If you want to get those updates, make sure you click like and subscribe. But for now, let's get into this inflation data. As mentioned, Canada's inflation rate hit 7.7% in the month of May, the highest level of inflation since 1983. And although the 7.7% inflation rate is going to come as a bit of a surprise, as it is higher than many predicted, the elevated rate of inflation isn't going to surprise many Canadians who have been to the grocery store or the gas pumps any time recently. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland gave a speech last week where she outlined the government's $8.9 billion plan to tackle inflation.
A new set of measures is coming into force right now to help the Canadians who need it most. This is $8.9 billion in new support for Canadians this year.
Among the measures announced by Freeland, although already budgeted for last year, include a 10% increase to OAS, a $500 one-time payment for low-income Canadians, free dental for those earning less than $90,000 per year, and increases in the GIS, CPP, child tax, and GST credits. However, Scotiabank issued a release critical of the government spending plans, arguing that the fight against inflation cannot be won by monetary policy alone.
You want to help me out?
Scotiabank argues that the government spending initiatives is making it so the Bank of Canada is going to have to go even higher on interest rates than it would otherwise have to. That the demand reduction, the spending less, if you will, is falling solely on the private sector, with the government continuing to spend more. So the idea is that for every dollar the government spends, the private sector, vis-a-vis higher cost of borrowing and subsequent spending reductions, has to decrease its spending.
If you need to achieve a certain reduction in economic activity to achieve an inflation outcome, you can either achieve that by reducing private demand, public demand, or both.
Well, Scotiabank has predicted that the Bank of Canada will be raising its policy rate up to 3%. It says that were the government to cut spending, the Bank of Canada would only need to raise that rate up to 2.25%. Scotia acknowledges that although inflation is rising and people are definitely suffering, an increase in government spending, more money being pushed out by the government, may in fact make the problem worse.
You can understand the tricky politics of it all, right? I mean, the cost of living is going up, it's expensive, people are unhappy, they want help.
Yeah.
And the natural thing for a government to want to do is to provide that assistance, right? So you have governments cutting checks to folks, you have governments trying to provide some financial help to lessen the impact on household budgets. But of course, doing that makes the inflation problem worse in some extent.
As such, Scotia is saying that we need to have policy coordination between the Bank of Canada and the government as a means to fight inflation, that the Bank of Canada can't do all of the heavy lifting, and spending cuts are in order from the government as well.
One mouth, two ears, listen to each other.
But, as Scotiabank readily acknowledges, people are suffering, and obviously the higher cost of goods is definitely having a negative impact on everyday Canadians. We've all read the stories about the grocery store and the pump, and we've seen it ourselves. So Scotia readily acknowledges this and notes that this is going to be a tough needle for the Bank of Canada and for the government to thread. Nobody wants to see anybody struggle unnecessarily, but it's not clear according to Scotiabank, that direct payments are going to make the problem any better long term. In fact, it could very well make it worse. With people hurting, there is a real demand for extra help, but there's also a real risk that the extra help will create a self-reinforcing loop where that extra help filters in through the economy and pushes the inflation rate up even more, causing more demands for government help. So this is definitely going to be a very tough needle for both the Government of Canada and the Bank of Canada to thread as they try as best they can to engineer this soft landing to get the inflation rate under control without causing too much pain, too much damage, without causing too deep of a recession. We'll obviously have updates out on this channel on the progress of both the government and the Bank of Canada in getting this inflation rate under control. If you want to get those updates, make sure you click like and subscribe, and thanks so much for watching.